Good morning. Welcome back to Q 2016 here in Palm Springs. I'm Chris Walsh, and we just had a great keynote from Hadi Partovi. So thank you so much for being at Q and sharing all your thoughts about code.org.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to present.
Yeah, so this is your first time at Q. We were just talking about this. What do you think so far?
It's an amazing crowd. There's a whole lot of excitement here, which is more than I expected, yeah.
Really? Yeah, well, I mean, I think they're excited about all the same things you're excited about, and so maybe that's a good match.
Yeah, the level of energy here is really palpable. That's really what was exciting for me.
Yeah. So we definitely want to talk about code.org and some of the new initiatives that you're certainly working on. But I'm also wondering if sort of how your own personal story has led you to some of the work that you're doing, some of the success you've had, and in particular this passion and this movement, if you will, to kind of help our youth get into technology and into coding.
Sure, I started code.org actually as a hobby.
Like all good things.
Like all good things, there was no plan for changing the world education system or anything like that. And the initial hobby was just to make a video that says computer programming is important and cool and more people should be doing this. And the reason I did that initially is just my own background. I feel so fortunate that I've learned this skill, and I taught myself. When I was growing up, there were no schools that teach you computer programming or computer science, and I've had such
in Iran.
In Iran, but even when I came to America, until I got to college, there were no schools. But as soon as I entered college, I knew I wanted to become a computer science major. But that's because I already had the grounding, and I felt so lucky to have had that background that I felt I should be encouraging more students to try to do the same thing. But that really was just a hobby. I mean, it's really the reaction that people had to the very first video that code.org put out. The original code.org was just a hobby to make one video. But that one video had 10 million views, and it became #1 on YouTube. And more importantly, 20,000 schools reached out saying, we want this at our school. And I was like, well, this is just a video.
Yeah. What is this?
Here's the video.
Tell me.
You can have it. It's on YouTube. It's free. But that was the inspiration to really build a whole organization and what has now turned into really a movement, which is a little bit mind-boggling to think that there's actually a movement going on, but it really is. And it's cool to be among the people at the forefront of that movement.
So obviously a lot of people's entry point was the video, and then Hour of Code sort of came after that. What was sort of the inspiration, the thinking, and the design sort of behind to structure it that way? Because I think that it has a lot of power as an entry point, right? But a lot of people don't tackle it that way. They go to a PD, or they go to a course, right? Or workshops or summer camps. Tell us a little bit about how that kind of came about.
So this is a fascinating story. I've written about this once, but I don't think I've ever sort of described it this way.
An exclusive at Q
Live.
Live.
Exclusive. So yeah, the story of how the Hour of Code came about, there were two things kind of happening at the same time. One was code.org, which was just at that point, I just disbanded the volunteers who had been helping make the video. The director and the camera crew were gone. It was just me and a website and 10 million views. And I didn't have a plan for something after. And I remember thinking, there wasn't really a call to action. And we had 10 million people watch this video, and what do they do next?
Right.
And how could we possibly get 10 million people to do something again? And then when they get that intention, how can we get the attention of 10 million people? Meanwhile, all these different people wanted to help us at all sorts of levels. Like Enrique Iglesias wanted to help us.
Wow.
Snoop Dogg wanted to help us.
Where did that come from?
Celebrities of different sorts. This is great. How can I help?
Cool.
But then the White House called saying, we'd love to get the president involved in some fashion. And so of course, I was like, that's certainly a call you answer. And they said, what could the president do to help this effort and to join forces with these folks from tech? And the first thing I said is we should have the president try writing his own code,
right,
and just as a symbolic act that anybody can do this. And they said, that sounds like a great idea, but what would be the context? Is he in a classroom? Why is the president writing code? What's the point of him learning to code? What's the storyline around it? And I said, how about we create a festival or a thing and try to get lots of classrooms to write code, or just pick a week like Computer Science Education Week, have everybody doing code that week, and then the president could be one of them. Which, long story short, means the reason the Hour of Code came about was partly to say what could we do that could get 10 million people's attention again,
Right.
and was partly designed so that we'd have a storyline to create a reason for the president to get involved.
Is that the amount of time the president could give, an hour?
Actually, he gave about 45 minutes. But what was actually pretty funny about this is this was basically in May of 2013. So by June, we're doing the Hour of Code. And we told the White House, we're doing this. It's going to be this big deal. And they're like, how do you know it's going to be a big deal? And I'm like, well,
we had 10 million people.
yeah, but we had 10 million in a video. We didn't have their emails.
Right.
But either way, they were interested. But then in October, the government shut down. And then in November, the healthcare site launched, sort of. And
Sort
then
of.
they weren't as responsive to the idea of the president.
But they
writing
realized the
code.
value
They
of
realized
coding
the
at that
value,
point.
And they didn't say this, but I know they were thinking like, when the website's down, the president learning to code. Probably not the message we want to show.
I could just see the headline: President Obama codes failing, healthcare website.
Yeah, exactly. So that year, that was the first Hour of Code, and it was a huge success. And the president issued a speech about computer science, which was a very, very powerful speech, and that went viral. But then 1 year later, for the next Hour of Code, we actually got him to host an event at the White House with students, and those students were learning for the very first time as well.
And I want to come back and talk about the president's recent kind of support for computer programming in schools. But you put up some stats today in the keynote around the success of Hour of Code, and obviously that's probably surprise, right? You didn't know all these things were going to happen. But what's your favorite? What's the one you're most proud of?
God, there's so many things I'm proud of. Certainly at the broad scale level, the idea of creating an international movement is just not something anybody thinks that they can do. Like, creating a product in technology that spreads is already pretty darn cool.
Right.
But this is more than a product. And for me, the measure of that actually is the places you really wouldn't expect. And probably my favorite stories come, just since I was born in Iran, are stories from war-torn areas in the Middle East. Somebody in Seattle, where I work, somebody recently went to Palestine, or to a Palestinian refugee camp, I think in Syria. And they went to this refugee camp, and they're from the tech industry. And the refugee camp people were like, oh, you're in tech, we just did an Hour of Code with the refugee children.
That's great.
And they came and told me that. They're like, what? Like, Palestinian children in refugee camps are doing the Hour of Code?
Yeah.
That just hits home at a level, when you hear about all the bad things happening in the world around us, knowing that this message of opportunity is being carried forth in all the places you wouldn't expect. In Africa, there's an island called Cocos Island. It's somewhere in the Indian Ocean. It's like this tiny, it's like one of the smallest countries. That island decided every inhabitant of the island, which is 600 people, they're all going to do the Hour of Code.
That's great.
So it's the unexpected places that are the most amazing.
So you mentioned coding and opportunity. Certainly, I'm at a tech startup in Silicon Valley. We have all these amazing stories of people who've dropped out of school, who've been successes. We also know that's not the norm. But why is it, do you think, that coding itself, forget about the skills and the future and the big picture and all that, but why is coding such a great equalizer and opportunity for so many people?
So first, I usually, since we're called code.org, but I think of it as computer science in general.
Absolutely.
And the reason is, for example, cybersecurity is a big deal.
Yeah.
And managing cybersecurity isn't actually about coding in many cases. It's it's part of computer science, and you definitely want experts working on it, but they're not necessarily coding experts. But the reason this is such a big opportunity is we see technology changing everything around us. And it's not, it used to be, cool new video games or then the World Wide Web, but you see Uber changing transportation. There's self-driving tractor trailers changing completely how agriculture works. Drones are going to be doing much more of the military work that we do instead of actually having fighter pilots doing it. Whether it's manufacturing, agriculture, architecture, entertainment, everything is changing. And the idea, every American realizes that. You don't need to tell people that there's, change is happening. And that change message actually spells out opportunity. And in the Bay Area in particular, this is most extreme because there's this income gap is just increasing and increasing. And really it's partly about opportunity and partly, I think, about just fairness. Because when you look at the wealth that's being created in Silicon Valley or in tech companies around the world, and then think that the majority of our kids aren't being given the one course that leads to that path is not being taught. Like, that should be the one course that is being taught to everybody, given that's where all the opportunity is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of research now that basically has proven that when you give people access to the internet, when you give people access to some basic tools, they do amazing things. And there's a lot of agreement now that a lot of the innovations that are coming forth are not going to come from the Silicon Valley, Seattle, Austin, et cetera, the hubs. They're going to come from these outlying places just because we created these opportunities.
Yeah, I would bet every person with a smartphone has had this moment. Like, I'm sure you've had it. I'm sure everybody watching this has had this moment where you think, oh, there should be an app that does blah, blah, blah,
X,
blah, blah.
Y, Z, yeah.
If you don't think of it, your friend thought of it, and you've
Right.
talked about there
Right.
should be an app that.
Right.
And then you don't think, I'll go build it. You think, when will they?
Exactly.
And it's always they. When will they come out with
right.
that?
Right.
And the reality is, like, your 10-year-old kid could be
Exactly.
the they if their school got them on the path. You
Right.
don't need, something like Facebook start out of a college dorm room.
Right.
Things like this do. The amazing thing about computer science is you can start as a one-man thing.
That's right.
And
It
grow
is a
from
great
there.
equalizer. There's no doubt about it. So let's talk a little bit about the president's new initiative, and obviously it's very tied to what you're doing.
Sure. It was a very special moment for me personally when the president gave this speech saying, computer science is no longer an optional skill. It's a basic skill, just alongside the 3 R's of reading, writing, arithmetic. Just saying that alone is a big, big statement. When the president of the United States says that, it's not just for the United States. And in fact, for Code.org social media, our single most shared ever thing on social media has been that statement. But the president also made a proposal along with that about a $4 billion budget proposal to fund teaching computer science in all of America's schools. Quick news flash for the people who've congratulated me on the $4 billion that just got allocated.
It's not coming to you.
Yeah, first of all, it's not coming to me.
They
and
can't
second
keep
of all,
asking for a check.
yeah, it's not coming to me, but also it's not actually clear it's coming because when the president makes a budget
proposal, sure.
it's a proposal, and in the way that today's politics work, there's kind of a fast track from the president's
Right.
desk to Congress's waste bin
Right.
because Congress is controlled by a different party.
Right.
And in fact, no matter how good of an idea this is, there needs to be a movement that shows this isn't just the president's proposal.
Right.
This is America's proposal.
Right.
This is something that manufacturing companies need. It's something entertainment companies need. It's something our teachers want. It's something our parents want.
Right.
It's something California wants, but it's something Arkansas wants. Every state, every industry. And that message needs to be heard by Congress because Congress doesn't want to rubber stamp a president's proposal.
Right.
So really, for us, our big objective is making this America's proposal. And also the $4 billion number is just not feasible in today's economic environment. So even a $250 million, which is a far cry, much more cost effective and within the current federal budget limits. But within the federal budget limits, we spend $70 billion a year on education at the federal level. If 250 million of that was spent on computer science, it would totally change the scales and balance the opportunity ladder across America's schools. That's something every American wants, and I think that's something Congress can get behind.
So there's the call to action, right?
Yeah, if you're watching this video, consider writing your congressperson saying, please fund computer science education. Most people don't write their congresspeople, but these days you can one Google search and you can just type your email, your address, and type a message.
You need to get the automated forms going. So
we will get the
Okay,
automated forms.
good.
For me, part of the next 6-7 weeks is about building up the machinery
Mobilizing.
for mobilizing.
Uh-huh.
And Code.org is lucky to have roughly 3-4 million fans and followers, whether on email, social media. But this is no longer just about Code.org.
Yeah.
Every organization in education, I think, can get behind this. Certainly every organization in technology, but every industry actually cares about this. The American dream and opportunity is something we all believe in, and it's kind of broken when our schools aren't teaching the course that leads to the best paying jobs. And I think it's something we can fix if we put our minds to it.
Well, there you go, Q community. There's your challenge, right? So thank you so much for coming by. Thanks for the great keynote today.
Thank you.
For everybody here at Q 2016, I'm Chris Walsh. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.